Rhodes is a star player for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Running Rebels basketball team. She's also a Navajo Indian. She loves basketball, but finds that her education is more important, not just for herself, but also for others.
The knowledge I get from UNLV, I'm going to bring it back here and be able to help my people. I'm majoring in accounting, but there's a lot of things that interest me because I've seen a lot of youth who have been hurt here. For them to go out there and succeed, it's true that they have to overcome a lot of obstacles, but it takes their inner strength and their outer strength to be able to do that. And then that's where our culture comes in.
The Navajos have centuries of experience at facing and overcoming hardships, but much of the wisdom gained in that process has been lost. If they are to succeed in the future, it will be due to people like Gwyn Hobbs, who are trying to prove that indeed youth can make a difference. In the Navajo story of creation, the world we live in is just one in a series through which all life is passing. The current world began covered with water. When land finally arose, 4 sacred mountains marked the boundaries of Navajo country. Navajo tradition is rich with stories about the early days. Now, additional details are being added by archaeologists and other researchers. They believe that the Navajos once lived in the Arctic regions of North America. Over many centuries, the tribe migrated southward across the continent to their current homeland. Research also suggests that they are distant relatives of the Apache Indians, since their languages are fairly similar. They called themselves Diné, which means the people. Much later, they were given another name by invading Spaniards, the name by which we know them today, the Navajos. They settled in what is now the American Southwest, an area very different from their former home. The weather, the land, the animals, the plants, everything was new. But the Navajos were a very adaptable people. One of the biggest changes came when they met the Pueblos, an ancient tribe that lived nearby. The Navajos had always depended on hunting and gathering whatever food they could find. But the Pueblos grew corn and thus had a steady food supply despite the arid climate. The Navajos saw the advantages of agriculture and soon became successful farmers themselves. Everything about Navajo life was well adapted to the world they lived in. They built their homes called hogans from materials available nearby. Thick branches formed a framework which was then covered with mud and earth. The result was a sound structure that was cool in summer and warm in winter. Unlike some other tribes, the Navajos did not gather into villages or towns, but a married couple would often live near the wife's relatives, forming an extended family. In the early 1500s, Spanish conquistadors invaded the region. Many Pueblos went into hiding with their Navajo neighbors, but others were enslaved by the Spaniards. Finally, in 1680, the Pueblos revolted. In the process, they let loose hundreds of horses, sheep, and goats. These animals were not native to North America. The Spaniards had brought them all the way from Europe. As the animals thrived in the grasslands of the Southwest, the Navajos went through another major transformation. They once were hunters who became farmers. Now they became shepherds. And the sheep changed their diet, their clothing, their very lifestyle.
The sheep is our livelihood, and they're very precious to us. They're like our little children, we rely on them. We use the meat, we consume the meat, and we use the hide for various purposes, even for bedding like that, or even to place down on the ground during a ceremony like that to cushion ourselves that way. They're very important. We use every part of the sheep. Up in this area we have mountain lions, bobcats, we got deer up here, we got wolves further up, and these animals are very smart. They know what kind of plants to eat, even though they're sick, to heal their body like that. We're they're special to us. They walk on this earth like this. They take care of the earth itself. So they're very important to us. Even all these animals, even the deer, we consume the meat and we use the hide for ceremonial purposes, or we make buckskin out of them, and so, or we use them as a trade item, something like that. So they're very important to us, the animals.
The transformation of Navajo culture before the 1800s was significant, but even greater changes would be thrust on them before long. In 1821, Spanish colonists revolted and established the Republic of Mexico. The new country's stated boundaries encompassed much of the Navajo's land. At first, not many white people settled in the area, so there were relatively few conflicts. But the situation changed when, in 1848, Mexico ceded the land to the United States. Suddenly, homesteaders, miners, railroaders, white people of all sorts started traveling through and sometimes settling on the land that the Navajos considered sacred.
The idea of land ownership is a concept that was brought over here by the white man. He's the one who decided that he owned the land, that he had control over nature, that he was going to take the land, he was going to farm it, he was going to put it to use, he was going to make money off of it. It's going to be economically viable lands. He was going to develop the natural resources and so forth. Indians did not accept that idea. They were here as stewards of the land. They were here to take care of it while they were here, but they never own it. That was a concept that the white people introduced to them. That was one of the roots of the conflict between the white man and the Indian.
Trouble came to a head when the U.S. Army built the aptly named Fort Defiance right in the heart of Navajo country. Navajo leaders Barbancito and Manuelito led an ambitious attack on the fort in 1860, but could not overrun it. The decentralized political structure of Navajo society had been an advantage in avoiding the Spanish conquistadors, but it was a disadvantage against a powerful, organized, and persistent foe like the United States. Navajo culture was simply incompatible with the concept of large, extended military campaigns. Instead, the Navajos made numerous small attacks in an effort to keep white settlers and travelers away. Finally, in 1863, Brigadier General James Carleton led the U.S. Army in a full-scale effort to bring Navajos under control. He hired the well-known Indian fighter Kit Carson to help. He then built Fort Sumner in what is now New Mexico and planned to round up the Navajos and move them there. The Navajos left their crops and herds and fled into the rough countryside, many of them hiding in Canyon de Chelly.
Back in old days, when the soldiers were coming out to hunt down the Navajos would go up into the caves, and they had a long ladder which they used to crawl up into the caves from their enemies, and they would pull up the ladders with them so that their enemies wouldn't crawl up after them, and that kept them pretty safe.
The Army had a hard time finding the Navajos in their many hiding places, but Carleton had a ruthless strategy that didn't require finding the Indians. Instead, the Army simply destroyed the Navajos' crops and livestock. Eventually, facing starvation, they had no choice but to surrender. In the spring of 1864, the Navajos endured one of the darkest moments in their history. Carleton forced them to march 250 miles to Fort Sumner. The long walk, as the Navajos call it, left many people sick, injured, or dead. And when they got there, government mismanagement led to food shortages that sickened and killed even more Indians. Meanwhile, Barbancito and Manuelito held out with small bands back in their home territory for another 2 years. They finally surrendered in 1866, just before Carleton was forced to resign. The Bureau of Indian Affairs took over relations with the Navajos, and a commission, headed by Barbancito, negotiated a return to their homeland and a reservation where their peace would be guaranteed. Things were looking brighter. The Navajo reservation was soon invaded again, this time by numerous religious missionaries, all seeking to turn Indians into English-speaking Christians, whether the Indians wanted it or not. The Bureau of Indian Affairs also set up schools on the reservation, which were met with resistance. However, some newcomers came to do business with the Navajos, and they were more welcome. Private businessmen set up trading posts where the Indians could obtain what they needed without money by bartering crops, wool, and other goods. Even more importantly, the trading posts linked the Navajos with the outside world. And the Navajos discovered that they had things that the world wanted. This gave them another chance to demonstrate their adaptability. Weaving had been a traditional Navajo craft, but it took a new turn with the increasing availability of wool and commercial dyes. When the outside world started clamoring for Navajo blankets and rugs, the Navajos were ready to exploit the demand. Likewise, silversmithing was fairly new to the Navajos, but they soon became very skilled at it. Thus they became known for their beautiful silver and turquoise jewelry. The demand for one population meant that the Navajo sheep and other livestock were more important than ever. But the herds grew so large that they started overgrazing reservation lands, resulting in soil erosion. The federal government sought a solution. John Collier, head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or BIA, had good intentions, but found himself embroiled in a major clash of cultures. Collier believed that if the Navajo reservation was expanded and their herds reduced, it would solve the erosion problem.
Fewer sheep, better pasture, and diversified farming are the answers to the Navajo's problem. In Fruitland Valley along the San Juan River, a new agricultural community is being developed through the construction of an ambitious irrigation system.
The Navajo viewed their herds as the natural world, a gift from Mother Nature. They had incorporated the animals into their diets, their lifestyles, and even their religious ceremonies. Thus, they gave little support to voluntary herd reduction programs of the early 1930s, and the erosion continued. Finally, in 1936, overzealous government agents began slaughtering animals in large numbers, leaving many individuals with herds too small to support them. In many cases, the government's cash compensation for the lost herds was also inadequate. Thus, whether the program helped save the land or not, it increased the number of Indians depending on the government for financial support. By the 1940s, Navajos had gotten a lot of mixed signals. The BIA said it wanted to help, but it killed off their herds. White society lost aspects of their culture, such as weaving. Yet reservation schools taught their children to despise other aspects of their culture, especially their language.
When I went to school, there was no Navajo talking. No, that was a no-no. No Navajo cultural things. You can't mention the activities that are going on at home. You couldn't bring them here. If you got caught, you got for it. You stood in the hallways with your arms straight up in the air. If you got tired and brought your arms down, they slapped you, you know. If you bent over, touched your toes, you stood there like that for hours. If you begin to sink down, they slap you.
Punishments also might include washing a student's mouth out with soap.
How can I wash my language out of my mouth? They tried to stop my language while I'm going to school.
Teddy Draper was recruited by the Marine Corps in World War II to help defeat the Japanese. He joined the Code Talkers, Navajo Indians who used their native language to send coded military messages. The Japanese never deciphered it, and the Indians' contribution to victory was great. Although very proud of their service record, Teddy and others felt that white society was again sending mixed signals.
When I came to that office, they told me we are going to use your language. We are using the Navajo language now. That's when I thought about it. But they told me not to speak Navajo in my class, my early learning. It's just in my thought. And then there's another thing, that why I'm fighting another person's war. So there I thought too. They stole my language, now they stole me for the combat. I have those feelings already at that time.
As they moved into the latter part of the 20th century, the Navajos saw the effects of the educational system. Young people no longer knew the language of their parents and grandparents, and with such a language barrier, their culture was at risk of dying.
Each Native American has their own theories, their origins, their mythology, their own ways of teaching. And these are handed down from generation after generation. And with the Navajo people, they have an oral history rather than something that's written down.
If you don't understand the Navajo or speak the language, it's difficult to understand those stories and those teachings. You lose a lot. You lose that spirituality, which is what Navajo is about, which is what we are about.
This is one of the reasons why Navajo language is being taught, so that they can write it and they can read it, they can share their stories, they can document what is happening for their children, and we'll have copies of these. I became very interested in the language when the state of Arizona put a charge on us and said, this is coming, we want you to get ready. There is going to be a foreign language taught in schools, grade 1 through 8 by the year 2000. And so without anybody telling me what to do, I attempted to go ahead and begin teaching Navajo. I tried it out. And so we have gotten together, the teachers have gotten together and have developed words, because we don't have words for everything in the Navajo language. Like back in the 1800s, there probably wasn't a word for camera. And so it's just a descriptive thing. The thing that you take pictures with is the name of it. And with our school having to do the Navajo language, I started on our own Navajo language for the elementary school, and I kept a record of it. That I went back and I edited. Now it's under publication. There are a series of tapes that go with it. There are 10 minutes lessons for every day throughout the whole year.
The site of all this ambitious activity is Chinle, a small town on the Navajo Reservation in northeastern Arizona. Today, Chinle High School is playing host to a conference where young Native Americans from far and wide can discuss their common issues and seek solutions. Appropriately, the conference opened with a traditional blessing by a member of the older generation, speaking in his native language.
The way I feel is we are slowly losing our heritage because there's very few who know about it. And the only way is just to learn, whether it be in book or whether it be orally from a Navajo medicine man. And especially through our grandparents, listen to them. Understand why these stories that they tell are there, and keep that in mind to teach the next generation.
Every teaching that the Navajos and the elder Navajos teach to the younger generations, if they take it to heart, then they'll be able to succeed.
There are some Indian youth who grow up, not really knowing a whole lot about their culture and their traditions. And I think it's very important. It almost sounds like a cliche, but before you know where you're going with yourself, you have to know who you are and where you've come from. The kids that you saw here today, particularly Navajo kids, a lot of these kids are very comfortable with who they are. They know their culture, they know their traditions, they know their language and everything.
This is a special place for me because this is where my ancestors live. And to be able to come back down and just be near the housing, be near where they lived, kind of fills me with the feeling of enchantment. It's just so beautiful.
Mother Earth here, we consider her our mother, and the sky, their father sky, like that. And Mother Earth, she takes care of us like this. We're very close to her, and they say that we have our skin's the same color as Mother Earth, like that. And as Native people, we understand plants. We use them for medicine. We use them for vegetational dyes in our rugs, and also to paint with.
The Navajos believe deeply in living in harmony with nature. But as they look for ways to increase their financial independence, they face a dilemma. How to capitalize on the coal, uranium, and other resources that the reservation holds while minimizing environmental harm. The solution to this quandary may well lie in the creativity and energy of today's young Navajo people.
Mother Earth is very sacred to us because she has given us everything we need. She gives us shelter, food, and water, our main necessities and shelter. And to just take from Mother Earth and not give back would be very ignorant because she has given us life and she's provided the necessities for us to live, yet we're destroying her bit by bit. And as an Earth ambassador, I like to say to the young people that take care of your planet, take care of, this is Mother Earth, and don't hurt her. And sometimes when I think about that issue, I think about, I picture in my mind a lady crying while her body is being hurt. And that really affects me.
The Navajos recognize that no matter how responsibly they treat their own homeland, the health of the environment is also affected by people outside the reservation. Thus, to maintain harmony and balance between human beings and the natural world, they need to form partnerships with non-Indians. And the first step will be to give the outsiders a more accurate idea of what Indians are really like.
A lot of people out there don't understand this, the people who live in cities and they drive these cars around, you have smog and skyscrapers around. They don't understand our way of life out here. It's Native American lifestyle. Their culture is very hard, culture's language, culture's dress, culture's food, culture's religion, culture's home, and plus activities that you do like that. It's very hard to be Native American and live that lifestyle in a traditional way.
I think it's one thing that most of white America doesn't understand. They have these visions of Indians as they pick up on television or movies, whether it's, you hear about this all the time. The image of most people have of Indians is teepees and feathers and so on and so forth. And like for what you saw here in this conference, these are just they're kids like anybody else. They're young people like anybody else. They have a unique culture, unique tradition, unique ways, but at the same time, they're in more fundamental ways. They're not a lot different than kids anywhere else. There are more similarities than there are differences. I guess there's differences, but there's more similarities than there are differences.
I think the greatest challenge a young person, especially a young Navajo person, to face today is being able to balance their two worlds. We live in a modern society, yet we have to be able to hang on to our cultural background. And when I get stuck in a problem or something, I turn back to my cultural background, and it helps me. It gives me that little enhancement to get over the problem.
The Navajo believe in walking in beauty. May you walk in beauty, may you walk in with beauty above you, before you, on the side of you, behind you, below you, above you. And I think that all summed up in Hojona Nada, which is may you walk in beauty.
I'm proud of who I am. I'm a Native American, I'm a Navajo. And then that's who I am, that's what I am. Nobody can change it, nobody can take it from me.
One of the most important things I think in anyone's life is family. And then, of course, your culture and your tradition. That's what determines who you are. I see a lot of kids out there lost. They don't know who they are. They don't know their culture. They don't know their language. They need to know these things. You need to learn these things to find out who you are way down deep. There's that craving for your culture, for your language.
To believe in oneself would be something that would lead to great success. Meaning, if you believe in yourself, you can basically do anything. And I believe in myself, and I'm trying my hardest to help my Navajo Nation. And I just want to tell young people that you can do anything you want. You can be anybody you want to be. You can be the President of the United States if you want to be the President of the United States, and all things are possible.